Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty unique. It's an administrative document, really, but it reads like a 19th century legal soap opera.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at just one Civil War minor pension file, minor claim number 962848,
Right.
filed for Elmer E. Hutchinson. He was the dependent son of a veteran, Albert Hutchinson.
And our mission here, it's, more than just tracing one soldier's life.
Definitely.
We really want to show you, the listener, how the relentless, almost forensic demands of the U.S. Pension Office back in the early 1900s, how they essentially forced this family to compile this huge, decades-long and a really deeply personal history.
Yeah, an autobiography almost.
Exactly, and one filled with, frankly, chaotic and often contradictory information.
It's like bureaucracy preserving chaos, isn't it?
Perfectly put.
The veteran, Albert Hutchinson, he died way back in 1896. But this claim for his minor son, it didn't even start until 1911, and then it dragged on all the way to 1926.
It's incredible.
So what we're looking at isn't just an application, it's basically a 15-year government investigation.
Trying to verify every single detail of, well, at least 3 lives across several states. It's astonishing.
So let's start with the soldier himself, the guy whose service kicked all this off, Albert Hutchinson.
Okay. Albert Hutchinson. He served as a private Company D, 1st Regiment Iowa Cavalry Volunteers.
A cavalryman.
Yep. And his service was, it was long and pretty tough. Enlisted September 1862. Mustered out down in Austin, Texas, February 1866.
Long time. Anything unusual in his service record?
Well, there was a brief period noted, absence without leave, June 18th to 30th, 1864. Not uncommon, but it's in the file.
Okay. And like a lot of veterans from that time, he didn't file for a pension immediately, right?
I know, much later. August 16th, 1890. He was living in Liberty, Clay County, Missouri at the time, and he filed for permanent disability. He listed this, just this long, exhaustive list of problems.
Like what?
Rheumatism, disease of the kidneys, heart disease, piles and eye problems. Pretty much covering all the bases.
Okay, so that's what he claimed. But you mentioned contradictions earlier. What did the official exam find?
Yes. That's the claim side. But when the official records start talking, they often tell, slightly different story. June 24th, 1891, the medical examination report comes back. And yeah, there's a pretty stunning contradiction in there.
Okay.
The examining surgeon actually noted Albert's general health as good and sound.
Wait, good and sound? After that lift?
Exactly. And they specifically stated, and this is a quote, his heart normal, no valvular sound, no functional disease, and also, definitively, no piles.
Wow. So he claimed all that, and the doctor basically says, nope, heart's fine, no piles, generally healthy.
Pretty much weighed most of it away. This is the government being, forensic, like we said. They check everything.
But they must have found something wrong. He did get a pension.
They did. 2 specific things they couldn't ignore. First, disease of the eyes. He got a very severe rating for that, 16 out of 18. He claimed he cannot distinguish a letter with either eye, although he could still see to go around and do many things.
Okay, so significant vision loss. What else?
And then rheumatism. An 8 out of 18 rating for that. Specifically, limited motion in his right shoulder and hip.
So based on the eyes and the rheumatism.
He was approved. $12 a month, starting December 2, 1891.
$12 a month. And that continued until his death.
Until his death, yes, which happened July 22, 1896. He died in Doniphan, Kansas. He was 60 years old.
And the government stopped paying pretty quick, I assume.
Oh, yeah. By May 31st, 1897, he was officially dropped from the pension rolls. And it's striking, just to show their level of detail.
What's that?
They had an undertaker, a Peter Miller from Wathena, Kansas, provide a sworn affidavit, just to verify the exact date he sold Albert the coffin, July 22, 1896.
Down to the day. They needed to know precisely when their financial obligation ended. Incredible.
That level of documentation is just, it's relentless. And it really sets the stage for the miner's claim that followed.
Right, because once Albert was gone, the focus shifted, didn't it?
Completely. The burden of proof landed squarely on the miner's mother, Eliza. Her full name was Honoree Eliza Van Valkenburg.
And for her son, Elmer, to get that dependent pension.
She had to prove 2 key things. First, obviously that Albert was dead. That was relatively straightforward with the undertaker's statement.
Okay.
But second, and this was the big one, she had to prove she was Albert's legal and, importantly, unencumbered widow at the moment he died.
Unencumbered, meaning?
Meaning neither she nor Albert could have had another living, undivorced spouse floating around out there when they got married or when he died.
Ah, and this is where just proving their marriage certificate wasn't enough?
Not even close. This is where a simple bureaucratic task exploded into this huge investigation of decades of messy family history.
They had to clear the decks, basically, every previous spouse for both Albert and Eliza.
Exactly. Let's start with Albert, the veteran. His first wife was Julia Harding. They married way back in 1859 in Iowa.
Okay, so what was the problem there?
Well, the pension office immediately flagged an issue. Some early affidavits, probably from Albert himself or neighbors, mentioned a former wife named Emily M.
Emily M., not Julia.
Right. Contradictory information. So the office basically came back and said, hold on. Prove who the mother of Albert's older children actually was. They needed clarity.
I find it fascinating how these files actually force families to publicly correct the historical record, sometimes years later.
It happens all the time. And here, there's an affidavit dated October 27, 1911. So years after Albert's death, it explicitly states that the name Emily M. had simply, and I love this phrase, crept in by error.
Crept in, like a typo.
Sort of. Just an error someone made somewhere along the line. The affidavit confirms, no, the first wife was definitely Julia.
And here's a wild side note for you on that error.
Oh, yeah.
That confusion over Emily M. was so persistent in the files that when Albert's son from that first marriage, Guy Thomas Hutchinson, when he applied for old age assistance in 1941, decades later, the VA had to reopen this very pension file just to confirm his parentage because of that old discrepancy.
No kidding. So this file kept generating data points long after everyone involved was gone.
The bureaucracy just keeps churning. It's forensic history, like you said.
It really is. But okay, so Albert's past, while a bit messy with the name confusion, they eventually got it ironed out. Julia was the first wife. She presumably died before he married Eliza.
Right, but the real legal headache, the real friction, came from Eliza's history, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets complicated. Before marrying Albert, Eliza, remember, Honor Eliza Van Valkenburg, she was married to a man named Henry Nolan.
Nolan, N-O-L-E-N?
Yes, though sometimes it appears as Noland, N-O-L-A-N-D. They married back on March 25, 1885, in Doniphan, Kansas. And they had 2 children together, Howard and Peter Nolan.
Okay, so she was married before Albert. The pension office would have immediately focused on that.
Like a laser beam. Following that legal chain of title idea we mentioned, they needed definitive proof.
Proof of what? That Henry Nolan was dead. Or that she legally divorced him before she married Albert in 1893.
Exactly. One or the other. Without that proof, her marriage to Albert might not be legally valid in the eyes of the government.
So what did she provide? Did she have a death certificate? Divorce papers?
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
She provided a story, not really a solid document.
A story.
Yeah. She testified in 1912, trying to explain it. She said Henry Nolan left home about 1888. And her words were, he just got up and went away with another woman.
Wow, okay. So he abandoned her.
Apparently. And then she added that she later heard, through the grapevine probably, that he was killed in a row wreck.
A row wreck? What does that usually mean?
It often referred to some kind of serious accident, maybe a train wreck, like you said, or sometimes even a violent fight or brawl that led to a disaster. It's a bit vague.
But it wasn't official proof, just hearsay.
Precisely. And think about that detail. Just got up and went away with another woman. That personal, painful detail had to be officially written down in a federal file.
Just to satisfy a bureaucratic requirement for her son's pension claim. Unbelievable.
And the claim basically hits a wall right there. Because without a death certificate for Henry Nolan or a divorce decree or some kind of clear court ruling of presumptive death.
The government viewed her marriage to Albert Hutchinson as potentially invalid.
Potentially bigamous, yes. At least not proven valid, which would mean she wasn't his legal widow and Elmer wasn't entitled to the pension through her.
And did it make things worse that she might have fudged the initial application?
It certainly didn't help. The record shows that in her first application in April 1911, Eliza initially declared that neither she nor Albert had ever been previously married.
Oops.
Big whoops. That statement was almost instantly contradicted by witnesses and, well, Albert's own earlier pension records mentioning children from a first marriage.
So her attorney must have been scrambling.
Constantly filing clarifications, amendments, new affidavits, trying to explain away the inconsistencies and salvage the claim. It was a real mess.
Okay, so this brings us into the next phase, really. The investigation didn't just look backward at marriages before Albert. It also tracked Eliza's life after Albert died in 1896.
Absolutely. The scrutiny didn't stop when the veteran was buried. They had to ensure nothing happened later that would affect the minor's eligibility or potentially her own future claims.
And her identity itself seems like it was constantly shifting on paper.
It really was. You have to track her carefully through the documents. She appears as Eliza Van Valkenburg, her maiden name, then Eliza Noland or Noland, then Eliza Hutchinson.
And it didn't stop there, right?
No. Later, she becomes Eliza Fay, and eventually, much later, Honorela Schleininger. It's like an identity crisis documented by government forms.
And even her role as mother wasn't taken for granted.
Not entirely. She was Elmer's mother, yes. But regarding the pension money, the courts got involved. Although Eliza initially just, quote, assumed guardianship of Elmer after Albert's death, by November 1911, the probate court in Buchanan County, Missouri, officially appointed someone else, a James A. Gibson, as the legal curator of Elmer's estate.
So not the mother. Why?
The file doesn't explicitly state why, but often it was because the mother was maybe seen as unable to manage funds, or perhaps because of her complicated marital situation. They wanted an unrelated, court-approved person handling the potential government money for the child.
Wow. Okay, so they're tracking her name changes, appointing a separate curator for the son, and then there's her life after Albert. You mentioned more marriages.
Oh, yes. The pension office compiled this incredibly meticulous record of what you can only really call Eliza's subsequent marital whirlwind. It spanned decades.
Okay, lay it out for us. After Albert died in 1896.
All right. November 14th, 1898, she married Samuel King.
Okay.
Less than 2 years later, August 7, 1900, she married John McColgan.
Okay, number 3 since Henry Nolan.
Then, May 23, 1906, she married Osceola Fay. This one lasted a while, relatively speaking. They divorced in September 1923.
Fay, that's one of the names she used.
Exactly, Eliza Fay. And she wasn't done. Much later, September 8, 1930, she married Daniel Schleininger. He died shortly after in January 1931.
Good grief. So that's Nolan, Hutchinson, King, McColgan, Fay, Schleininger. 6 marriages in total, traced by the Pension Bureau.
5 documented after Nolan, yes. Spanning 45 years from 1885 to 1930.
I mean, just think about how invasive that is. The government is keeping this running official tally of her personal life.
Her marriages, divorces.
For decades after the Civil War ended, purely because her son, Elmer, needed financial support back in 1911 when he was, what, 16?
Around that age, yes. Born July 22, 1895. So he was 16 when the claim process really got going.
And this relentless tracking, it came to a head again later, didn't it, when Eliza herself tried to claim a pension?
It did. In 1926, this is 30 years after Albert died. Elmer would have been well past the age of minority support by then. But Eliza applied for a pension for herself as a remarried widow. There were laws that sometimes allowed widows who remarried and were later widowed or divorced to potentially regain pension rights.
Okay, so she thought maybe she was eligible again after, presumably, the Fay divorce in 1923.
Seems likely. But here's where it gets really interesting, and it just highlights how incredibly strict and unyielding these rules were.
How so?
The Commissioner of Pensions responded to her 1926 application. And they basically laid out the law for her. They advised her that since the record showed she had remarried at least twice after Albert's death, specifically naming Samuel King and Osceola Fay, she had another huge burden of proof.
More proof? What now?
She needed to prove that both of those subsequent marriages, King and Fay, were dissolved either by death or divorce.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. She had to prove the dissolutions occurred without fault on her part.
Without fault on her part for both marriages. How would she even prove that, especially for the King marriage from way back?
It's a staggering legal hurdle. It meant digging up divorce decrees, maybe proving abandonment or cruelty by the husband, basically retroactively justifying the end of every single marriage she'd had for the past 3 decades.
Just to potentially get back on the pension roll herself, long after the minor's claim was relevant.
Exactly. It shows the government's perspective. Once you remarried, you generally forfeited the soldier's pension. Getting it back was exceptionally difficult.
And throughout this whole minor claim process, from 1911 onwards, the commissioner was just constantly demanding more. Right?
Relentless. You see these letters in the file, 1911, 1912, pinging back to the attorney or the guardian, always demanding better evidence. Where's the official record of death for Henry Nolan? We need clarity on Albert's first wife, Julia or Emily M. We need verified dates and proof of dissolution for all previous marriages, for both Albert and Eliza. More affidavits, more witnesses.
You mentioned an attorney, but there are other names that pop up facilitating this.
Yeah, you notice the recurring figures who are actually documenting all this chaos on the ground. There's one name, W.H. Chattel. He was a notary public in Buchanan County, Missouri. His name and seal are on so many of the key affidavits between 1911 and 1912. He's the one authenticating these statements, witnessing Eliza often just making her mark because she couldn't write her name.
So he's the local official essentially capturing her life story, piece by often contradictory piece, for the federal government.
He really is. He's the conduit for turning this messy personal history into formal, albeit confusing, legal testimony.
So the bottom line here, the big picture of this whole process,
Is that the government treated marriage history with the same rigor, maybe even more, than property law, like a chain of title for land.
right, each link in the chain, each marriage had to be proven valid, and the end of each previous marriage had to be definitively proven. Death certificate, divorce decree, no ambiguity allowed.
And if there was a missing document, like that death certificate for Henry Nolan, or if there was conflicting testimony like the Emily M. versus Julia issue.
The claim just stalled, ground to a halt.
Exactly. Which ultimately is what happened here.
Yeah.
That's the end of the story for the minor, Elmer E. Hutchinson. Despite all those years, 15 years of documentation, affidavits, notary seals, tracking 5, maybe 6 marriages.
All that effort.
The minor's claim, Min, 962848, was eventually just marked abandoned.
Abandoned. After all that, they just couldn't satisfy the burden of proof, likely.
We couldn't close that gap in the chain of marital title to the government's satisfaction.
So what does this all really mean for you, listening to this?
Well, I think the journey, this one file, the Hutchinson pension file, it really illustrates how a single claim for a dependent child could morph into this incredibly complex genealogical and legal investigation stretching, 35 years past the veteran's actual death?
Yeah, it really demonstrates the sheer, almost unbelievable tenacity required of Civil War families, especially the widows like Eliza. They needed to prove eligibility to a government that demanded absolute certainty about every single, often deeply intimate detail of their lives. It was unforgiving.
And the key takeaway, I think, is how these cold, methodical demands of the bureaucracy, they inadvertently create these incredibly rich, if often chaotic, records of personal life.
Hidden archives of struggle.
Exactly. Things that would otherwise be totally lost to history.
And that kind of leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with today.
Okay.
Think about Eliza. Eliza Fay, Eliza Van Valkenburg, whatever name she went by. She had those 5, possibly 6 marriages across 45 years. From 1885 to 1930.
A long, complex life.
And consider how many crucial human historical details, little facts about her life, might have vanished completely.
Like what?
Like the story about Henry Nolan running off with another woman. Or, get this, there's even a mention in the file, pulled from a newspaper clipping apparently, about Eliza being hit with a brick in some neighborhood fight back in 1899.
Wow, a brick. That's specific.
Right. These tiny, messy, real-life details, they might have been totally lost to history. Forgotten.
If not for what?
If not for the U.S. Pension Bureau's absolute dogged, relentless insistence on verifying every single life event, no matter how peripheral it seemed.
All for a minor's dependent application that was ultimately abandoned anyway.
Exactly. They demanded that personal chaos, those fleeting moments, be written down, notarized, and codified into an enduring public record. They forced history out of hiding.